Drug overdose deaths soared to over 93,000 in 2020. That's a 30% increase over the previous year. That's tragic and alarming. But beyond the statistics are the stories of real people, people we love, our families, our friends, our neighbors, who share their stories of pain, grief, and loss and suffering through addiction, as well as the stories of those who work tirelessly to combat this devastating epidemic. I'm Mike Torville. Join me now for Healing Voices Project. Hello everyone, and welcome to Healing Voices Project, where we share stories of addiction, grief, recovery, and courage. I'm Mike Torville, your host. Today we're dedicating this episode to my friend Frank Baginski. Frank was a friend of mine, a friend of my family's, who died in December of 2019 from a heroin overdose. And in honor of Frank, we're asking if you'd like to donate to Heron Project. That's heronproject.org in honor of Frank Baginski. Thank you. Now today we have a special guest, my friend Chris Bernier. Gotten to know Chris over the years, especially when writing the book, Voices from the Fallen. Now Chris is licensed by the state of Massachusetts as a mental health counselor, social worker, drug and alcohol counselor. And I will say, you've got lots of designations next to your name, and it's easier to spell it out that way. Chris, thanks for joining us today.
Thank you very much. I appreciate the opportunity to come in today.
Sure. And one thing I'll mention, because when I mentioned the book, but with the book Voices from the Fallen, when I wrote that a year and a half, 2 years ago, and that was a project that was very difficult, and I wanted to make this book different. And I thought, how do we make it different, with different perspectives and insights from people? And I got to know you from my daughter-in-law, Angela. Yeah. And you know, we met for lunch and we started talking, and I said, wow, this could be good. There's a lot of information you've shared, and then you volunteered to offer, and after each story you write the clinician's comments, which gives a sort of an objective opinion, sort of a detached overview of what you see relating to that story. Mm-hmm. And then at the back of the book you wrote a great summary that sort of sets it in the bigger picture. So first, thanks for doing that.
Oh, you're welcome.
Great job. And I think what I've heard from people is that to them made the book different and provided a different perspective to say, okay, we have the perspective of the person speaking, the addict, perspective of the families, but you offer a third-party sort of objective assessment there.
Yeah.
And this is something you live with every day.
Yeah. I've had well over 20 years in the field working with children, working with adolescents, working with adults in mental health and substance abuse. And it's amazing when a family first experiences some sort of trauma or some sort of issue with mental health or substance abuse. They have no idea how to navigate a system or systems and ask for help.
You know, you and I heard that a lot. So many people I've talked to, they say, I had no idea when confronted with this. I had no idea what to do. And they're paralyzed. And ultimately, they make bad decisions. Mm-hmm. That happens a lot, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Parents and families, they want the best. They want to help out. And sometimes the way they want to help out is not the best way to get things done, to help that individual who's struggling with either that severe mental health illness or an addiction in this case. Mm-hmm. We've had a lot of families just want to be keeping it quiet. It's still taboo in our society. You know, having a son or a daughter or a brother or sister or a spouse who's an addict is still forbidden to talk about. It's still looked down upon.
That stigma.
It's stigma.
It's still strong.
Yeah.
Yeah. And part of what we want to do is, I think when people, and it's slowly changing with alcoholism, because I think there's less apprehension, you know, a little less than it was before, but still there's the shame, embarrassment, and the discomfort. People say, I don't know how to talk. I feel like a failure as a parent. I feel like I don't want people to know about this. But it affects all of us in every level, and the more we talk about it, the more maybe we can relieve that stigma and make people feel more comfortable reaching out, and just trying to erase that stigma. How do we do that?
That is such a difficult question to
Yeah,
ask.
yeah.
There's a lot of education that needs to happen.
Yeah.
I know that Massachusetts puts out their public service announcements every so often, but it doesn't get to us. It doesn't get to the families that really need the information. I've actually been doing a lot of work with the Agawam Public School, and a lot of other high schools ask me to consult and talk to parents, talk to teachers. What are we looking at? What does addiction look like? And first we have to notice, what does it look like before we can understand how we're supposed to be able to help out.
So what kind of things do you share with them that could help? I mean, if say somebody, well, I don't know what to look for. My teenager's behavior has changed. What do you share with them?
Well, there are some typical telltale signs. Their grades are slipping. Their attitudes are getting a little worse. That's typical for teenagers anyway.
Right, and you say, well, that's just normal, but there might be something more to it.
Yeah, there might be. And in context with failing grades, there may be some small theft. There may be hanging out with a different crowd of people. I noticed that, when I talk to my clients at the programs I work at, a lot of them have started off using drugs in their early teens. And over the decades, it had changed to their 10s and 11s and 12s rather than their teens. It just seems to be getting younger and younger when people first experiment with stuff.
And partly, I think, is because drugs are more accessible now.
They are.
Certainly than we were in school.
Yeah.
And how a typical high schooler, I've heard stories that if anybody wants to get drugs, it's not that hard to do.
It is not.
Yeah.
It is not. Social media is a firestorm or a fire sale for access to drugs and alcohol. All you have to do is instant message somebody, and somebody knows somebody else, and it's there. There's home delivery services. You can get this stuff through the mail in some cases. And there's always something new out there. There's always the next designer drug. There's always the next addictive substance that someone's going to find. And it's difficult. Teenagers are really great at social networking.
And they're very creative
Yes.
at finding ways to navigate through, okay, we have a barrier here because this, but we'll find a different way around it, right? Now you have kids.
I do.
How old are your kids?
My oldest is 21. My middle one is 19. My youngest is 15, and I just got recently married, so I have now a daughter who's going to be 15 in a couple of weeks.
Wow. Wow. That daughter and your other, I mean, right in the prime of where this starts, right?
Yeah.
So what kind of things do you look for with them that you see?
Yeah, so I look for, where are my children associating their peer group with? Who are they associating their peer group with? What kind of clubs or networks or activities are they engaging themselves in? Is it something wholesome like sports? Or is it, just hanging out with the friends after school behind, the bleachers or something? There's some nefarious behaviors that you can sort of pick up on. And knowing what your kids are doing after school, knowing where your kids are going when they just want to hang out with their friends, those are important things. And I've told all my children, I'm going to look through your phone. It's going to be random. It's going to happen when you least expect it. And I'm looking for social media. I'm looking for hidden files. I'm looking for stuff. And not to be a sneaky, suspicious person, because I love my children and I trust them. I just don't trust the things that they can get access to, or the people who can access their phones, the people who can send them messages. Those are the things I just want to help guard against, because kids are young and they don't know.
Let me ask you an obvious question here. What kind of resistance do you get when you tell your kids that you're going to do that?
It depends. It depends. With one child, they said, yeah, no problem, anytime. I'm like, okay, that's good. With one child, they said they just need a little bit of time to probably clear out their browser history.
Give me 5 minutes, Dad.
Yeah, 5 minutes. I'll get it right down to you. And I'm like, okay.
Yeah. Did I remember you said random?
Random.
So you're not going to give warnings, right?
Right.
But you find that they're compliant with, or at least saying, all right, Dad, you said you were going to do this, and you do it. And sometimes the kids' psychology, back to your parents, which doesn't work as well because they're not having the experience. But I remember when I was a teenager, and I was probably 16, 17, me and my friend Dan were going on this bus trip to watch our high school soccer team play in the state finals, and At 16, we were going to be drinking on the bus. In fact, we bought a bottle of vodka, a few beers, and we had all this set. And my mom said, she's going to kill me when she hears this. She said, "Where are you guys going? You're not going to be drinking at all, are you?" And my friend Dan said, "Actually, Mrs. Torville, we just bought a bottle of vodka, and we got it in a cooler with a bunch of beers. It's all on ice. We got beers, vodka. We're all set for the trip." And she started laughing. She goes, "Ha, you're so funny." And off we went. And I looked at him. I said, "What the hell were you thinking?" He goes, "Your mom wouldn't believe me because if just the mere fact that I said it, it was kind of like reverse psychology. Didn't it work?" I go, "I suppose it did, but parents have to be aware of that."
That's true. Kids know how to manipulate their parents.
Exactly.
They know what buttons to push. They know how to. I mean, they lived with them for so long. They know their tells.
Yep.
But it's hard as a parent.
Yeah.
I've never been a father of a 15-year-old girl before. And next year I'll never have been a father for a 16-year-old girl before. I have no experience. My mom says, I just met with her, a week ago or so, and she said, "As a parent, you'll never stop growing."
Right.
And I said, "That's great to know." I mean, because as soon as I became a parent, I didn't know everything. There's no handbook for kids.
Right.
How society is going to help them or hurt them or hinder or give them support. There's no handbook as a parent.
Oh. My kids, I really can't call them kids anymore. My son's 40 and my younger son is 37, and both of them are married. I love their families and their whole, and I'm grateful, extremely grateful, that they've grown up without the influence of drugs. But my older son has 4 children, 16, 14, 11, and 2. So, and I see it every day. I see it with him and the changes and what he's confronted and what his antennas are up for, and so, so far so good. But I think I'm watching it from a different level now. And also, like you said, I'm never stopped being a parent to my 40-year-old, watching him, but I don't monitor his activity. He's a great dad, but I watch what he's confronted with. And but it's tough. You're right. Now with the kids, and you were talking about whether in some wholesome activity could be dance or art or sports, and it's nice when your kids say, "Yeah, I went to my practice today. I went to dance," and you know what they're doing because they talk about it.
Yeah.
But when they stop talking about it, "Hey, how was your afternoon?" "It was fine." Well,
what does that mean?
Right.
What does that mean?
That's a clue too, right?
It is a clue.
Yeah.
When they stop talking to you, part of addiction wants us to isolate, wants us to be alone, to only focus on that substance, that instant gratification, the me, and we're only focusing on that. We lose connection. We lose connection and relationship with our family. We lose connection and relationship with those good, wholesome peer groups, with the pleasant activities that we've gone to, and we just want to isolate, and you'll get that first tinge of isolation when they say, "I'm fine." And they don't give you anything else. "What did you do?" "We just hung out." That minimalization of the overview of the activities.
Yeah, and that's something to pay attention to.
It is.
Now, you are a mental health counselor. You've seen it with people outside your family.
Yes.
And you've seen how trauma affects people.
Absolutely.
And whether it's a divorce or abuse, bullying, things like that have a big impact.
Yes.
Yeah.
The addiction is a form of escape for some people. And trauma causes a lot of mental anguish and pain, and it can cause sleepless nights and anxiety and just overall hurt, and people want to get rid of that. They want to just have it leave their mind and their body for a little bit, and drugs are a great way to do that, but they take everything else too, and they sometimes make it worse. Trauma is not just the abuse, it's also financial hardship.
Yeah.
We still have food deserts in our communities where people don't have access to health, to food, and it's difficult when you grow up in an environment where you just don't have enough, and that hurts too when there's not enough resources in your neighborhood or your home.
Well, you talk about that. We said it earlier. People don't know what to do. They don't have the information. They don't have the resources, and they can't make the right decisions. How would you point a family if you say, "I think my child is involved with drugs"? What's the first thing I do? I don't know to talk to, who to reach out to, what's the first thing you suggest they do?
Well, I actually had a family when I worked. When
Yeah.
I first started off, I was working at the Children's Hospital. It used to be Providence Hospital. That's
Mm-hmm.
all those programs have closed.
Yeah.
And I had a young child whose mother was addicted to cocaine, and it was him and his brother living in an apartment that barely had running water and electricity. The mother was using all of her money to fuel her addiction, and he became a behavioral problem and started acting out, and he ended up coming to the hospital.
And how old was he? About?
Oh, he must have been about 10.
That's all.
The
Just
first
10?
the first time he came in, and his brother was probably a toddler at the time.
My goodness. Wow.
You have state involvement, and he need medication, need something to help his behavior.
Mm-hmm.
But then 2 years later, he came in, and he's a 12-year-old. He was a bigger and stronger 12-year-old, and he was looking more haggard. It looked more psychotic in some way, but being hungry can do that to you.
You saw a drastic change, obviously.
Drastic change.
Yeah.
His conditions of the home worsened. And now, fast forward 10 more years, I was working at a community correctional program as the director there, working at clinical programming for people who are on probation, coming in because of drugs and alcohol, and I saw the same kid. And
Who is now 20,
he's 22.
22, yeah.
And he was starting to deal drugs to help support a habit, to help get food for the family. And one of the best interventions we did is said, next door is what's called a food pantry. You can get food for free. And you should see some of the stress and the hurt just come away from his face. It's like, I can help feed my brother.
And he had no idea how.
He had no idea.
Yeah.
We just don't have any idea sometimes about what's available in our community. So, we had a staff go over to the food pantry with him,
Mm-hmm.
fill up a box of groceries, and you should see the smile on his face. He participated more in our groups. He responded better to treatment, and he was clean from his drug screens. Sometimes just alleviating some barriers to treatment is enough to pull away that trigger for people to use substances. So access to resources is huge.
And so you tell somebody, go to this website, make this phone call. Is there an initial suggestion you have for people that say, okay, what do I do? Well, here's a few choices, right? Depending on
what's going on.
What's going on, yeah.
If there's a barrier to your home environment, we'll get you those services wherever they are.
Mm-hmm.
211's a great avenue. If you live in Massachusetts or anywhere in the country, dial 211.
211.
Yep.
Okay.
Massachusetts 211 operator will pick up and say, what do you need? Where are you? Just ask for something. I'm looking for food. They'll give you the names and numbers for all the food pantries that are out there. I'm looking for legal services. They'll give you the number for some free legal advice.
I bet you a lot of people don't know that.
No.
211.
You think of 911 for emergency services, fire, medical, police.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
211 is for everything else that you need. That's not necessarily
It's a good start to get you where you need to go next.
Yeah, absolutely. And then now we have families that say, well, my son's just using heroin, or my husband's using alcohol. What do I do? A detox may be the best thing to do.
Mm-hmm.
We have a website that actually accesses all of the detox beds that most clinicians should know about. And you just tell the family, all right, we have no beds in this area. Come call this number.
Okay.
This place has beds. Go over here right now.
Mm-hmm.
Don't bring this, bring this. And, let's start the journey there.
How's that person doing, the 22-year-old now?
I never saw him again, thankfully. I worked with still one of the probation officers that was his probation officer at the time.
Mm-hmm.
He stopped committing crimes.
And his brother?
He never went into the system.
Okay.
I have to take success as I can.
Yeah.
If I don't see them again because they didn't commit enough drugs to warrant committing crimes to support their
Mm-hmm.
habit, if they're not dead, if they're not bouncing in and out of treatment, then I think that's a success. They're able to navigate the world on their own.
And you don't know what happened to the mom either.
No, I don't.
Yeah. But sometimes if something goes wrong, you're likely to hear about it.
Mm-hmm.
And you didn't hear about it, so you have to take that as, okay,
Yeah.
that's good.
Fingers crossed, things are going well.
And that story, I think, you shared is probably pretty typical.
It is. It's pretty rare that someone comes back to me and says, hey, I was in your treatment program, and I did great, and I've been clean for 2 years. I've only gotten maybe 2 of those phone calls and 3 cards in the 25 years that I've been doing this. But it's great to hear that. The people, what you said, Chris, made the difference, or your program made the difference, and I changed my life around, and I'm doing great. Thank you. That
That
makes it worth it.
that helps you get up
It
the next
does.
day and do it again.
It
Yeah,
absolutely does. It's changing lives. It's helping to save people in
yeah,
some ways.
yeah,
And families have come back and talked to me and said, "Hey, I'm so thankful for the information you've given. It helps me." Right now I work at the courthouse. I'm a licensed mental health counselor at the drug court in Springfield, Greenfield, in Orange, and I also work at the mental health court in Greenfield. And families come up to the court clinic and knock on the door and say, "What do I do? I have a family member who's doing this. I don't know where to turn to, and someone told me to go down to the courthouse." And sometimes it's just a conversation with a family to help give them a voice, to help lend an ear, to help them process their pain and their suffering, and then point them in the right direction.
and I mentioned earlier, and I've said it a few times in earlier episodes, people feel alone. They feel isolated. They don't know where to reach out, how, when. But once they don't have to be alone. Once they reach out, things begin to change. But until then, the isolation, or the parent who seems paralyzed or maybe in denial or unsure, even if you're unsure, it's probably good to ask questions and find out, because then maybe you hear something and learn something by having a conversation. But until then, it's hard to make any changes.
It is.
Yeah.
A lot of parents talk to me and said, I Googled it. I Googled what I should do. Like, well, that tells me their desperation.
Yeah.
That
Yeah.
what they're doing on their own power hasn't worked. It hasn't changed the situation, and they're looking for more information and answers. Talk to somebody. Really, just talk to somebody.
If I asked you what a typical day was at work, I have a funny feeling you'd say, "Whoa, they're all different." So I don't think you have a typical day, but if you share some of the things that you're confronted with, and that might help people learn, okay, gee, I've seen that, or I can relate to that. Is there anything that you find as a repeat circumstances that
Well, I can I'll give you a typical day. I sometimes just go into the courthouse, and I go into the courtroom where there's an active session going on and people are being arrested. There'd be people arrested for assault and battery, or possession of drugs, or disorderly conduct, and it turns out that wasn't the first time. They've had a long history going into their early teens about disruptive behavior, lying, stealing, cheating, hurting people, and it's usually under the influence of substances. It's amazing that most people will do the right thing under the right circumstances, but you cloud their mind and their judgment with substances, and all of a sudden the police are being called, and they're being arrested either for the first time or the 10th time, and there's some sort of intervention that needs to happen. And then the judge will mention, all right, well, it sounds like you might need a program, or you might need this, and the attorney will say, yes, judge, my client is addicted, whether the person admits that or not. We call that coercive treatment, where people are kind of feeling forced to go into treatment. And even in private practice, I've seen that before. I'm coming in for treatment because my wife thinks I need help. Well, what about you? Do you feel you need help? Well, not really. All right, well, let's work on some of the things that your wife sees, and then sometimes you have to bring up their level of insight. So, going back to the courthouse, people get held, they go to jail, and then the judge will ask me to go do an interview, go do an assessment with this person, and I have to look at what's been going on with them medically. Substance use destroys people medically, physically. They're just absolutely awful. Look at their legal circumstances. Look at their education. Look at their job. It's easy for people to get a job. It's hard for people who are addicted to drugs to keep a job. Look at the relationships with their family. Look at their mental health. And as a clinician, I put all of that together and figure out where have drugs and alcohol really hurt them the most. And as a program, what do we need to do to make sure they get the best healing?
Well, you said a lot there. And so many conversations I've had with people, and starting early, whether it's just smoking pot or drinking beer, but what I've heard, of course it closes your mind. It alters your decision making, your judgment, and everything else. But a lot of times, and I'll admit myself included, I have a few beers and I'm like, I can do that. Maybe not. But but in some of the conversations I've had with people, I've heard them say, I would have never done the cocaine or driven like crazy or raced a guy down the street or done these insane things um, if I was sober. It wouldn't be part of what I do or think. I'd assess the risk and say, hell no, I'm not driving in reverse down the highway because it was a fun challenge by my other drunk friend. I mean, that's idiotic stuff, but it starts off with just a couple beers.
Yeah.
And to say, well, in fact, one guy said, we ended up at this party doing a bunch of cocaine all night long. And I know in the beginning of the night, I said, oh, no, 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 I'm not going there. I'm not going to do this. I have to get up tomorrow. I'm not going to do this. So it took 2 beers for me to say, hell yeah, let's go. Now, what changed? His decision making was altered only because of a beer or two. He got braver and he got bolder and all the inhibitions are gone away. It's all it takes.
Yeah.
Is the point where you say, and then, okay, maybe you commit a crime. Maybe drive drunk and hit somebody. It's something that would not have happened.
Right.
And then the rest of your life is affected.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And people have different opinions about the gateway drug and marijuana or just a few beers. It's harmless. I don't believe it's harmless because I think it just opens up the opportunities,
It is the opportunity to say, well, since that wasn't so bad, the next thing might not be bad either.
Right. Hey, marijuana's legal. How bad can it be?
That's right. That's right. Unfortunately, as parents, we don't understand that the marijuana we might have experienced when we were teenagers is not the same marijuana that's being produced by the dispensaries. That THC content is almost twice what it used to be. And there's other things called THCA. They're crystalline forms of 99% pure THC that you can put in those vape pens and smoke that. We've had people undergo psychosis for that.
Mm-hmm.
It lowers the threshold for schizophrenia and some other mental health illnesses. And people who use marijuana on a long-term basis have shown signs of anxiety, more paranoia, more depression, more problem sleeping, and yet those are the things that they might have started using it for. So there's been no. Again, it's innocuous. It's everywhere now, and it seems benign, but over time it can really do some damage. And there hasn't really been a lot of longitudinal studies about its health consequences.
The other thing I think is you develop an intolerance or a tolerance. I mean, a tolerance, and you need more.
Mm-hmm.
It could be more smoking, more drinking, more heroin, which I've heard, because I got the high and I want the high again. Now I need more to do that, and that just sets up a cycle.
It does.
Yeah.
Part of my interview questions is, all right, when you first were drinking,
Yeah.
how much did it take for you to get that buzz on first? And as a young child, it took me, maybe half a can of beer, and I'm like, okay, well, how much does it take for you to get buzz now? Oh, it takes a 6-pack now. I'm like, all right, so your brain has developed some sort of defensive mechanism, some sort of safeguard, so that you're not feeling the effects of this, and you're interpreting as, I'm totally good. I can handle it. I can handle my liquor. It's more of a badge of honor and manliness and
You're right.
Adultness that I can handle my alcohol or do 20 bags of heroin or 40 bags of heroin, and
Gives you bragging rights, maybe.
it does a bit.
Yeah. Even I remember when I was 19, and I don't like admitting it, but I was 19-year-old, and I was reckless and feeling this invincibility. I'm gonna live through whatever happens to me. I'm gonna live through it. Well, that's not right to think that way. So my friends would drink a lot of beers, and remember, same thing. We'd say, let's get a 6-pack, share a 6-pack before we go out.
Mm-hmm.
Well, after a while, we're buying a case of beer to drink before we went out, and that's a little stupid, to say the least. But looking back, I'm like, God, the crazy stuff that happened. Yeah, I did get in some car accidents, and yeah, that wasn't right, and I did things that I think back and cringe about. Fortunately, made it through not without some lasting effects. I still have an injury I'm dealing with from a car accident. But you can see how that tolerance builds up, and you think, at that time, let's get 2 cases. I mean, it just gets crazy.
And it builds up slowly over time, so you don't really notice it right away.
Right.
It's not like I drank 2 beers one night and 2 nights later I have to drink a 12-pack.
Right.
It just builds up slowly over time, and we just don't think of it as a big deal. If it's similar to obesity or diabetes, eating a candy bar a day is not a bad deal. But now that you're in your 40s and your doctor says, one more candy bar and you're going to develop diabetes. How did I get here?
What happened? Yeah.
I have no idea.
Last week I was okay. Now, yeah. And you're right. It's not noticed.
Right.
And maybe not even noticed by somebody you're close to over time. And maybe they do it with you, or maybe they just think, it just happens so gradually. All of a sudden,
Yeah.
you have a dependency.
Yep. And then there's some defining moment. The person's got diabetes. They had some sort of health condition, or they start having hand tremors. Like, what's going on? It's something noticeable. For the addict, it's probably that first time in jail, or that first time that a family member or a bunch of family members get together and say, we've noticed this stuff for a while, and we're having a family intervention. Like, you need to know that these things are going on. And a lot of people are like, I had no idea. It was such a gradual change. I had no idea.
We did that with my aunt. And alcoholism runs in my family, my grandfather, and a few other people that we've dealt with over the years. And again, my grandfather passed away at 80 in 1992. But prior to that, and I know there's a couple things that made me think of this, is when my grandfather was sober, he was a wonderful guy. I mean, he was about the nicest guy. Oh, Mike, you're here. And but when he drank, he was just mean, and different person altogether. And as a teenager, maybe I wasn't prepared for it, and all of a sudden I get something. I'm, whoa, what happened to Grandpa? He was drinking, but it was noticeable then. And my aunt had pills and alcohol, and that destroyed her life, really. But we've seen that up close and seen how that was a gradual thing from even the 60s when she started doing this, and how it just lingers on and on and on and on. And it just gets to a point where she was at one point very vibrant and very beautiful, and just had so much energy and friends and everything, and it just seemed to dissolve. And watching that happen, and you try to do the right thing, and you try to you start to get to the point where everything you do doesn't work.
Yeah, you want to love your family members, and you want to love them back to health, and you want to talk to them and care for them, but drug addiction changes your brain chemistry. You're not receptive to that. It changes the way you think about stuff. It changes the way you think about you, and another family's love, another family member's caring and interventions, they just aren't enough.
And we tried that with my aunt. We had an intervention. We had a bunch of our family members there, and said, Aunt Lynn, you're notice this and this, that, and we're feeling it's just destroying you. And so we said all we could say, and everybody tried to. Oh, she dismissed it. You guys are way off. No, I got this under control, and just tried to shrug it off. But I know that we expected that reaction, but I wondered afterwards, at the end of the day, when she went home and laid in bed by herself, had to sit and think, what was that all about? Because publicly to us, she didn't want to admit anything. But privately, just maybe it may still help. So I guess what I'm thinking about is, even if you have an intervention, you don't feel like you get that immediate gratification, just maybe it's sinking in after hours.
Yeah. In a clinical world, we call that the pre-contemplation stage, where I don't have a problem. But after some people bring up your level of awareness, you start to develop a little bit of insight, and then you get into the contemplation stage. Maybe I have a problem. Maybe I don't. And that's a great place to start, because it gets you sort of self-checking.
Yeah.
Is there an issue going on? What's my version of reality versus everyone else's version of reality?
Yeah.
And are they jiving together?
Yeah.
It's rare that somebody comes up, but it does happen, and people knock on the door and say, I need help from me, and I want the help. And people have come to the courthouse. I need to be Section 35. I need to go away. A judge needs to order me to go to a program for 30 days minimum, and I need to be a locked facility. I need help, otherwise I'm going to die.
What is Section 35?
Section 35 is the way the court can intervene for a loved one, a family member, or even an individual who feels that drugs and alcohol are going to put them in danger of hurting themselves or somebody else. A family member can ask the court for Section 35 for another immediate family member and say, hey, this person is abusing their drugs, they're hurting themselves, here's the evidence that we see. and the judge will order a doctor or a social worker to do that interview and say, all right, family member, give me what you got. Let's interview that person you talked about. And if it's true that the doctor or the social worker will say to the judge, yes, this person is in danger of hurting themselves or others due to drugs and alcohol, and they need the section, the judge will say, all right, we're going to take you and put you in a facility at somewhere in the state, and we're going to get you some treatment. We're going to clean you up. We're going to polish you up and see how it is. And then if the facility is able to break through it and that individual says, you're right, I've been clean, I can start thinking clearly, I need more help, they'll start the step down process. Go see a therapist, maybe get on medication assisted treatment, talk to get some family therapy, and a whole host of different services and interventions can be opened up if that person had been at first unwilling to get that help.
So if a family member sees this, how would they say, gee, I think I've heard about this Section 35. How do I make this happen?
Go down to the courthouse.
Go to the courthouse.
Yep, just talk to the court clerk.
Okay.
In the clerk's office and say, I'm looking for potentially a Section 35. Even if you just want to talk to either myself or one of the other doctors or the social workers, whoever. Just say, I want to talk to somebody. We'll come out and talk to you.
Yeah.
And then you can ask if it turns out that is the direction you want to take.
Okay.
Within your legal rights to file a Section 35 petition.
Okay. Now, and that's when things get that bad, that this is necessary. We always hope to nip it earlier.
We do. We do. And family members are like, well, I just don't know it. It doesn't seem like there may be enough for the court to intervene or involve themselves. I'll say, well, you know what? It may be really good for you to go to an Al-Anon meeting.
So there's some intermediary steps they can take to say, okay, maybe that's not appropriate right now, but what is, and somebody can help guide them.
Yeah, if family members just need support, if they need guidance, and it's not for their intended family member who may be suffering from the addiction, but other family members are suffering. Go get some support. The self-help group Al-Anon has been very, very helpful for family information, for support and guidance. Other things to look out for. And of course, there's always going to be the next time where that person who's suffering from that addiction is going to do something else that is dangerous.
And why wait?
Right.
Meaning, the sooner you recognize it, the sooner you can actually do something, even just having a conversation. And I know in my family and friends and different people I've gotten to know, people are hesitant to say something because, well, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe it's too soon. I'll maybe let them work it out. And we talked about possibly offending people or putting your nose in somebody's business where it doesn't belong, but it's out of caring, it's out of love, it's out of concern to heal that person. So you risk maybe a temporary offensive feeling,
you ruffled someone's feathers, big deal. But the alternative is you might have intervened at the great time,
right?
And you might have saved somebody.
Yeah.
And that's the important thing, isn't it?
Yeah. The sooner the better.
Yeah.
I know we could talk about this all day long, but and we'll have to wrap up soon. But anything that you think is, if somebody's listening to say, is there anything else that you think we should mention as a resource or something that comes up often enough for people that you're asked about a lot? Anything that's a common thing that we didn't talk about?
I think the most common thing is understanding that as people start on their addiction lifestyle, there's a lot of other things that they can't get access to. They have trouble paying for things, and then they feel that sense of hopelessness. So certainly 211 has been a great resource to help connect people in our community with services in our community.
So with a question, you don't dial 211, and from there you'll be directed to
a bunch of different places.
Okay, so
I mean, any organization that works with human beings on a human scale, they're going to be listed in that 211 network.
And that's really worth repeating. So I'm glad you brought it up again. Yes,
it is really worth repeating.
Wow.
But there's plenty of 1-800 numbers out there. 1-800 drug help. I know the Phoenix House runs that. You can call the crisis number 733-6661.
733-6661.
Yes, that's for the local crisis clinic. They'll come and talk to you about anything, whether it be a mental health, whether it be a substance abuse issue, and or you can go down to the crisis clinic. It's on 417 Liberty Street. I think it's run by BHN. And they'll just sit with you and talk to you.
Okay.
If you feel you're in crisis, if you feel you have nowhere else to turn to, there's places open 24/7 that will exactly cater to those needs.
Yeah. Yeah.
And they'll direct you to what you need.
Good. Well, Chris, thank you very much for joining us.
I
Appreciate
appreciate
it, and love to have you back.
Thank you very much.
Well, thank you everybody else for listening to Healing Voices Project. We'll be back again soon. Thank you.